Hey guys, this is Nihar Nikhil from FTC Team 18275 SubZero, and today we're going to be presenting to you the Control Award. So, a little bit about ourselves: we're both programmers for SubZero, and we've both had 3 years of previous experience.
So to get started, we'll talk about first the official requirements. We just screenshotted this from the game manual 1 of Ultimate Goal, and the list. Wait, shit. Can you restart? Wait.
No, I can just cut it out, don't worry.
Okay. Okay. So to get started, we'll talk about the official requirements that were posted from Game Manual 1 Control Award. So here are the objectives: autonomous objectives, sensors used, key algorithms, driver-controlled enhancements, autonomous program diagrams, and additional summary information. We'll be going over each one of these in detail during this presentation.
And we'll also show some world winning examples as well as some Skystone examples from this past season. All right, so here's the Control Award template. As you can see, it does outline pretty much the same thing as what was in the previous slide. And if you guys just want to go for a bare bones kind of control award, you can use this template. But we recommend you guys create your own template on either like Google Doc, Word, or whatever you guys are using. And one thing to notice is that Ohio usually wants you to keep your control award or your control page about one page front and back, but you may see that other states and some of the ones that made it to World were actually multiple pages. So we'll just have to watch out for this year on how many pages we're actually allowed to have.
And another thing you want to remember during competitions, if they're in person, you want to make sure that the control award is separate from the engineering notebook, and you want to let the people know in the beginning that you have a control award submission so they can keep that into account.
Yep. All right, so starting off with the first thing, which is autonomous objectives. So basically, all you're trying to do is just explain what you can do in your program in your programs. So for example, we can talk about how you can get 2 Skystones, Foundation, Park. Just pretty much you want to just talk about the objectives that you're able to do, and you want to make sure that you're actually able to do this most of the time, so about 75%. Otherwise, the judges may notice in your matches, they might notice that you aren't able to do those, and they could dock points. So that's important that you're actually able to do them in your programs. And you want to try to keep it as simple as possible. Don't get too complicated while talking about this stuff. You just want to be straightforward on what you're able to do in your programs. And one other thing, which is optional, but it's really helpful for the judges, is including an auto path diagram. And this just gives a bit of graphics for the judges to be able to see, and they can kind of compare this to your actual matches, and they just have like a nice layout of how your autonomous programs will look. And this can be done in Microsoft Paint, in Google Drawings. They're pretty simple to do, but they're really effective.
So next up, we'll move on to sensors used. Sensors, you just want to be able to list all the sensors you use in your robot, even if it's just for autonomous or teleop, because the control award is just for your overall programming of the season. So some common sensors that teams use in their robots are the touch and the color sensor, and also the webcam or phone camera for detection as well. So you just want to make sure that you explain how you use them in the control award and how they improve your autonomous, if either in autonomous or teleop, as I said before. And you just want to make sure you show in detail the reason you used it and how it enhances your robot. And you want to make sure that these aren't in bullet points and they're in like a sort of a summary where you show how they're being used.
Yeah, so the webcam and phone can be overlooked for sensors, but they are actually sensors, and it can be pretty useful to add them as they help out with your vision or however you're using them. And then another uncommon sensor that you might want to include if you're using is actually PID. So although PID is a programmable sensor, it actually does take in some sort of input and provides output, which means that it is a sensor. All right, so moving on, we have key algorithms. So key algorithms are one of the most important parts that you can talk about in your control award. So basically, you want to mention anything that you guys are using. Some examples may include odometry, PID, however you're calculating your ticks, or any sort of math that you guys are using. We recommend that you don't include any screenshots of your code, as you might want to include that in your engineering notebook, and it could be kind of redundant. It's important to not go super technical in the control award, as it's usually the control award is going to be overviewed by the judges, and they're usually going to be looked over pretty decently fast. And usually you want to talk about that stuff in your judging as well as in your engineering notebook. So as you may notice, when we show some winning examples, they usually try to minimize the technical, like a lot of technical terms, and they kind of just try to bring it straight to the point and kind of just explain exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. So now we're going to be moving on to the driver controlled enhancements of the control award. So this is just on the teleop side of programming. So you want to include gamepad mappings, if possible, of your controller 1 and controller 2, and show which buttons move what part of the robot. This is good for the judges to see because they can see how you control it and if you have any unique tactics that are different from other teams. And another thing you want to include, if you do have, is automation. Automation is basically where you have one button that can do multiple things on the robot. This isn't just good for the control award, but it's good in teleop, so you can make things faster and more automated and less controlled by the drivers, which makes it more accurate many times. And using enhancements is good to have because during teleop, when you do want to go faster, it's a benefit. So you just want to make sure you have that in the control award and then just explain the benefits of it as well as in judging as well.
Yeah, so one thing takeaway is try to include gamepad mappings, because again, it can help differentiate, and it's easy to see graphics. Like in your engineering notebook, you always want to add like images and stuff, so it's pretty important to have a lot of images in your control award. And an easy way to see if your gamepad mappings and stuff are much more automated and differentiated from other teams is to see your gamepad mapping image, and that can just be helpful to portray the message that you have a lot of driver controlled enhancements. So it's pretty helpful to have. Okay, so we've talked about this before, autonomous program diagrams. So basically, you should try to replicate 1 to 2 unique autonomous paths through graphics. So you can create this using Google Drawings, Microsoft Paint, or any graphic software. And again, you want to make sure that you're actually able to do this most of the time. Otherwise, you will be docked points if you aren't able to do them in your actual matches. So just try to have some sort of diagrams or graphics in your control award, as they can be really helpful for the judges to notice.
And another thing for it, besides just the diagram, like if you do have something like, for example, you collide with the robot or like just bump into it and you can still adjust yourself, adding things like that will be helpful for your autonomous program diagrams. It's not just the picture itself. It's good to have some explanation on something that's unique. And that's like the main point of the control, to show how your programming skills and benefits are unique from other teams.
Yeah, so again, if you're using any like complicated algorithms or anything, and you can condense that into some sort of image just to show that, that can be more helpful than just using some technical terms that the judges might not be able to understand. So yeah.
So some additional information summary that you can have on the bottom of your control once you finish everything else. This is optional again, but you might want to make sure you have referencing pages from the engineering notebook. So in your programming section, you can have more detailed and technical terms and explain those in your engineering notebook summaries, like engineering notebook. And it's good to have if the judges have any questions and you they don't have time to ask those during the judging. So it's good to mark down, like if you maybe put a tab next to the pages that will be involved and just mark it. It'll be good for judges to see. And also during the judging session, you wanted to talk about a little bit of your programming skills and like just make it so it's like tailored towards the control award, so they'd be able to tell, oh, they're explaining the control award in this way. So it's just good to be able to talk about all those different things.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to be looking at a couple examples. So we have Gluten Free's Rover Ruckus control award. So this one actually did win Worlds. And then we'll be looking at their Skystone example as well, um, which did win some of their competitions, but of course, Worlds was canceled this year. So as we can see, starting off, we have this huge, we have a large image right here, kind of explaining how they do their autonomous movements. They have a lot of nice paragraphs right here.
And one thing you can clearly see is that they aren't using the template that FTC gave them. They created their own doc and template, which is something that you can do. And you don't even need to include the objective points around it, as long as you just have that information there that the judges can see clearly.
hmm So that's one important thing to take note. And then next they have their custom PID control. So they're creating big headings for their important topics, and they're kind of going through them um, with um, in paragraphs. And as you can see, they tried to minimize the amount of technical terms they used. They kind of explain how they're using the PID control, but towards the end, they explain how it really works. They try, but of course, they try to make sure that they're just explaining how it's used and how it's benefiting their robot. The next thing they talk about is their active braking system. So they kind of just talked about how it was a problem, how they had some problems, and they fixed them using some of their techniques.
So the next thing that they had, as you can see, is their autonomous feeding. And it says right there in the beginning that it's their teleop control. So this is going on back to the driver enhancement part. So you just want to show how they help. And like, for example, it can talk about how the robot can move itself and be able to move the linear slide just by the click of one or two buttons. And it does explain how it's faster and safer compared to manual control.
hmm So again, they have some nice images. Um, they did not include a gamepad mapping, but they did include a image of how their robot would move during teleop with their horizontal linear slides. And then here we can see um, their pure pursuit algorithm with this diagram, and they kind of explain how they create these fluid movements that you might have seen on YouTube. Um, and then
And
we can, yeah,
so the
go
last
ahead.
thing that like something else that they have, of course, is the autonomous program diagram that we talked about. And it's good to show like the steps of it. As you can see, they numbered all their steps and explained what it does very vividly. So it's just good to have that. And if there's something extra that your robot does, it's just good to have that and show what it can do.
hmm And then lastly, they kind of took the template and they kind of just put out the bare bones bullet points right here. And then above, they kind of just went in depth through everything, pretty much. So we will try to link this presentation in the video so you guys can check out all of these links. Um, this was, again, the controller award that did win Worlds in Rover Ruckus. So it's it's pretty useful to take a couple things from this and implement it into your own award, into your own control award sheet.
But one thing you just want to make sure is that you have everything that the official requirements do have. And as I said before, you don't need to explain, you don't need to show like this is what everything is. Just make sure you have all the content and have everything ready to show the judges.
hmm
And one thing they didn't have, as we mentioned before, is pictures of their code, because that's something you can put in your engineering notebook and mark it there as well for them to see.
Yeah. So gluten free is known to have some of the most advanced programming as well as the most advanced mechanical. And as you can see, they didn't include a lot of that in their control award, which they included in their engineering notebook most likely. So, yep. All right. So now we can just take a look at their Skystone. We can probably just look at this a little more quickly because it's pretty much it's very similar laid out. So again, they talk about their pure pursuit algorithm. As you can see here, they kind of explain it in the view of like a car. They give that nice analogy for the judges. They don't try to use very difficult terminology. They have this nice image right here to show how the algorithm works with its look ahead points, all of that information.
And one thing you want to make sure for the controller word that I don't think we mentioned is because this is just all like programming, like it's programming summary of the controller word. So you want to make sure that the judges will be able to understand everything because they might not all have a background in programming. So making sure they'll be able to understand everything or add definitions if you do include technical terms, it's just good to have. So they'll be able to understand your whole thing and not just like guess on what some of the terms mean.
hmm So again, we have we have an odometry pod diagram, which is pretty useful to kind of show how they use these dead wheels to find their relative location on the field. And they don't use the word odometry, but they do use the word absolute location on the field, which is just easier to understand because not everybody knows what odometry is, but they do know what this means right here in this heading. They explain how they had issues with slippage and other things, and then they kind of explain their solution, which is odometry. And then at the end, they have this nice autonomous summary. Same thing with the bullet points and a nice diagram right here. It looks like they did a 3D diagram. Um, Again, it doesn't need to be super complex. It can be done in like Google Drawings, Google, just anything, and it just needs to show what you can do in your autonomous, and it should mimic your actual program. And then they have this nice little table of things that they can do in bullet points.
And then here again, they have the driver and control enhancements, also known as teleop automation. And here they explain it more in detail of the different things that and include pictures as well. So it's good to have that as well in your thing.
Yep. All right. So lastly, we're going to be looking at virus. So as you can see, this is very differently laid out, but they it did win a lot of awards.
So you can see that their first heading itself was algorithms and sensors, which is one of the official requirements. So they do have it said word for word there, which is good for the judges to see as well. So there's
Mhm.
many different ways you can do that.
As you can see, they have a nice diagram right here explaining how they calculate their odometry system. They have a few formulas right here to back it up, and you can refer to this image for these formulas, which is nice. And then they of course have this nice pure pursuit path, um, which similar to gluten free, they have these images to kind of explain how it works. Which is pretty nice. And then they have their vision system, which is OpenCV. And they kind of just create these little headings right here, and then they kind of go in depth and then have some images.
Yeah,
And then they
so
have this, yeah, go
Yeah, so
ahead.
this is like just going over their sensors that they had because they can use the webcam camera as a sensor. And then it's good that they have all these diagrams and showing how it really works because pictures do show a lot in meaning as well.
Mhm. And then global coordinate driven control, which is a part of their teleop. And so they're able to click buttons and to change their target position with their odometry and everything. So kind of just talk about that here. And then again, their PID. And then, so now they go into more specifics with their driver enhancements. So right here, like gluten free didn't do, they actually have a controller mapping right here, which is pretty nice. They have some images on how their robot will translate based on their joysticks. They talk about their linear slide automation using their encoders and everything. And then lastly, they have their autonomous outline.
So this, yeah, that was just like the recap of everything that they had on their robot as well.
Yeah, and then their diagrams. So this is kind of similar to um, we can just see at the bottom the same thing. Gluten free did that as well with their autonomous outline. So of course you don't need to add this at the end, but if you are going into in depth in paragraphs like how these two teams did, it can be important just to have a little summary at the end, just to put everything together.
So that was all for the control award. Remember, the award is optional, but it's good to have for the judges and make sure and show that you have a lot of programming intelligence and you're able to use your robot wisely, especially when it comes to programming. And it's good to have and explain in the judges in judging. So we hope to see everyone compete for the control award.
All right, thanks.